Gab, thank you so much for making the trek, coming up to Oregon to connect with us.
For sure.
I'm really excited to learn more about your story and also to know more about the origins. And I think when we like to have these conversations, we always like to know more about like what went into adding to the artist that you are, the creative that you are today. So I want to start with the 80s and the upbringing in South Central. Tell me about what that was like for you. And I think like in your household, I feel like you had a bit of exposure to what some might call Black excellence. What was that like?
You know, man, I think as I got older, I began to realize I was very privileged to grow up with the parents that I had, and like my grandparents and just like my grandmother especially, you know, and she like career-wise wasn't the most, but she was just she had so much love to share, you know, it gave me so much confidence. And she's really where I got my swag from, my grandmother, you know, she was just like, you know, very much like, somebody would tell her, she's like, yeah, I went to the church today. They said, oh, you look good today, Doris. She's like, I ain't never looked bad. You know, it's like, and she just taught us like, no matter how much money you got, no matter what, you always carry yourself in a way, you know, you always know your worth, you know, and I think I carry that with me today. And so, you know, even my pops, and there's things that I pull from him and his love for like art and just love for helping people. And, you know, he practiced, law, but he was, you know, practiced like civil law, right? And so, you know, my mom's was the entrepreneur who got it from her grandfather. So I got all of these things. I got my grandmother, I got my dad's art, but also community and wanted to do good for people. And then my mom, how to monetize it and making money in business and everything. And then I'm looking at myself and I'm like, oh, I'm a byproduct of that, you know? And so I was privileged, I think, to have that foundation.
That's special, because you, at a young age, to have that type of nurturing and to have that type of influence so close to you, right? Like, you could utilize it in ways that you wouldn't imagine.
Yeah.
But and as you're young, you're not thinking about that, obviously.
Right.
But
Right. You just question like, why am I different? Why do y'all think this way and I think that way? You know, why did I? And it was a lot of things I could have gone left had I not had that like instilling of just, you know, knowing your worth and love. I could have ended up very left, you know, and so, you know, I think that just knowing my home and my love and my family was huge for me. You know, it kept me out of gangs. It kept me out of a lot of, you know, different situations that ended up bad for friends of mine.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you definitely gotta appreciate, you know, those things.
Yeah.
Speaking of kind of family and some of the things that were pouring into you, you also had like your grandfather and some of his brothers, right? They had businesses, like real estate and liquor businesses, I believe. What do you remember observing about them in that line of work?
So I remember going to their stores, you know what I mean? I remember my uncle being able to give me some free chili cheese Fritos from the back, you know what I mean? And him just being like, yeah, grab a bag, you know, and not have to pay for it, you know? I remember hearing all the stories from my grandmother and my grandfather. My grandmother helped my grandfather run his business, you know? So I remember hearing the stories. And then I remember seeing moments like getting pulled up, my mom getting pulled over and like the cop finding out what her last name was, and they had so much respect for my grandfather that they let us go, you know what I mean?
Wow.
Or just like at the church and what he was able to do, like, you know, he was up at the church, he opened the gates of the church for years until he passed, you know, you know, gave a lot to the church and they had a lot of respect for him. So, and he did all of this like right there in our hood, in our neighborhood, you know, and so.
Didn't have to leave.
Yeah, he was a figure to the community, you know, and I think that just seeing that, and all his brothers were that way, you know, and it was like when you talk about Lamert Park, like my uncles and my grandfather were early, like people know them. The elders know who they are, you know what I mean? They got their names on signs, and they own property over there still to this day, you know, and I'm like, man, like, all right, cool, I got it.
You know where you're from, right? You know what your foundation is. So it's I think when you know where your foundation is, it's hard to to not live up to that, right? Or you don't have to have the issues of like, who am I?
Yeah.
Because you know.
Yeah, you do. And that's a big thing for, I think, a lot of people of color. It's like not being able to track or trace their story too far back to where they can connect to and see and understand their worth is more than just slave story. You know, it's more than just this. It's
or
like,
just working for somewhere, attaching your identity to a company or things like that. Like,
absolutely.
Life is much more, right?
Absolutely.
What was your earliest, so I know you have that side, but what was your earliest connection to art and creativity, right? Like, I think I recall there's a story around like when you were 5, like kind of art and painting somewhere started to enter the picture. What was happening?
It was through my pops. You know, my pops was, like I mentioned, a lawyer, but he would always be up late night just working and reading and documenting. And then it was one night I went in his office and he was in there like just like drawing and doodling, and actually he had a laptop back then, or like a PC, and he had the Microsoft Paint program, which is interesting because I ended up doing this partnership with them later. But it was him that really told me like, all right, just draw an oval and then put these lines through and put the nose here and put the eyes. Now you got a face, and I'm like, oh. And what stuck out to me the most was like, that was his therapy, and he didn't try to make it his business. That was his passion, He was like, this is my work, but I escaped like this, I escaped through my art, and he was an incredible artist, like, so, yeah.
Do you still have any things that he created?
Yeah, I do. I actually have one sort of like illustration thing that he had drawn when I was a kid, but I have a lot of things that I did as a kid too.
Yeah. That's so awesome, man. Like that's like those are those little memories that you take with you, right? Like especially whoever knows what happens in the business or in the process. It's like you need something to kind of keep you grounded some days. Tell me about. There was also a moment. There's this thing about this table in your grandmother's garage or something like that, and I think like someone built this table for you, but what does this table symbolize for you in your journey?
Yeah, man, so I think when I was, probably at the time, probably like 14, 15, I was, my homeboy went to, actually I probably must have been 15. My homeboy went to art school and came back and like told him like, yo, you can print your own t-shirts. I was like, what, you can print your own t-shirts?
What you talking about? Yeah.
There's this place, like there's a place downtown you can, and me and my cousin were there, we're just chilling, hanging out, probably smoking or something, whatever. And we're like, well, all right, let's do it. So we basically go down this path of trying to screen print t-shirts, and we had some extra wood, like my mom had tore this fence down or whatever. And so we needed a table. We were just doing it on the floor at first, what I mean? Like it was like hurting our back.
By any means.
What we was doing.
Yeah.
And so my cousin Brendan built this table for me, and literally like it was just a makeshift. Like he wasn't even a carpenter like that, what I mean? But this table was, we like banged out a gang of tees on this table. Like it, for whatever reason, I just remember that day of like, he knows how to build stuff. We can build this table. I got these t-shirts and this we're gonna screen print these t-shirts. Yeah. And we literally like, we would dry our t-shirts in the oven of my grandma's.
Wait, what do you mean?
I kid you not, like every tee we would take off, cause we didn't know what we was doing. We'd take it off and we would lay it on a cookie sheet and like fold the sleeves and I kid you not, and put it on the oven. So the kitchen is hot now because it's been on all day, and we just like t-shirt by t-shirt, and we would like sit there and open the door like this and see if like smoke start coming out. That's when it's done. You like pull it out, And so, man, my cousin Brandon like really helped just kick it off for me, man. And he would pull up regular. My cousin Gabe, and these were cats who were like real gangbangers, but we would just be at my grandmother's house and just
creating.
Like, yo, I'm gonna help you reach your goals,
Wow.
And they would just come and support me. So I always hold that experience in them really close.
Pretty close, yeah. What did your grandmother think about you using the oven to bake t-shirts?
She didn't know what I was doing. She just, don't burn down my house, that was her thing. Like, just don't ruin my So she was great though. She was supportive.
So you would continue, your energy for creating and bringing people together seems like something that's continued to follow you. And maybe it was around that time or maybe a little bit later, but you were also like pulling people together through like parties or something like that.
Yeah.
Just Be Cool.
Yep.
Tell me about that.
So, I think that was my brother and I. We were into just throwing parties. We kind of had like, we knew a lot of girls. We had a lot of homies in the city. And so we started throwing parties. And I was like, you know what, like, I want to create kind of something people can vibe with. I was a graphic designer. I was a self-taught designer. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna design the flyers. And I made this logo that just said "Just Be Cool," and I was like, what does that mean? So I really created this kind of like, I redefined what cool meant to me. And it was just like being positive, being peaceful, being accepting of others. Being accepting of yourself, and so. Man, we just started throwing it on T-shirts and all wearing it at the parties, and that's...
It was like on some like crew stuff, like it's like, this is the squad.
Exactly, and it actually became, like Dom one day, my boy Dom Kennedy, who I grew up with, was like, yo, I want you to talk about Just Be Cool on one of my interludes. So if you listen to 25th Hour, there's a Just Be Cool interview on there, and also on Future Street Drug Sounds, so him doing that just kind of helped propel it like globally. And so now like our LA party turned into this like global brand.
It's an event, like everybody's pulling up.
Yeah. So and that was all literally out of my grandmother's house. A lot of people don't know, like homies were pulling up to my grandmother's like, look at your T-shirt, and so that was quite really the kind of the start of everything for me, I would say,
How did, in that kind of pairing of relationship with you and Dom, how did that maybe unexpectedly help you, right? Like, how did it start to, like, I understand the idea of like it expanding kind of your audience, but like in a tangible sense, what did that mean?
Man, I think for a lot of things, like first and foremost, Dom is like a big brother to me. You know what I mean? I think as a young kid at the time, he gave us a lot of opportunity and confidence, in what we were doing. Like, he showed us that you could take this out of town, you could take this on the road, like he believed in what we were doing and we believed in what he was doing, so much to the point that he attached himself to the brand. It wasn't necessarily his, it was all of ours, but he
embraced
attached himself.
it.
I believe in this movement, So it showed me that like what I had was something that could go global in that sense. And then also, I think that it was a lot of relationships and people that we met and we were, Jefferson Park, Lamar Park with it, we were throwing parties in the city. He showed us like, there's another world, Like I discovered Fairfax through Dom. Because the hundreds wanted him to wear some clothes. So we were like, yeah, come up to Fairfax, we can go see these stores. And we was like, yo, what's this?
Yeah, it's a whole nother world.
Yeah, like it's 3-4 miles away. But we're like, what is this? And so I discovered a lot of the world traveling with either Dom or other artists that I worked with.
Totally. Yeah. As you were traveling and getting that exposure, I imagine a lot of that came, through graphic design, but also fashion, right? What were some of the brands during that time that really had an impression on you?
Man, I think in that time, I would say for a lot of us, the brands that had the biggest impression were like, the BBC ice cream era, right? Like that was huge for us. Pharrell was like, but as well, there was a lot, even, not gonna lie, like the early streetwear brands like Diamond Supply and the Hundreds and all that was like influential to the young kids. Like we were definitely looked at them like, damn, this is cool. Like that's dope to see that. And then there was also like a handful of brands that I really rocked with that were owned by Black owners and designers, like a Lamar and Dolly and like a 10 Deep. Those were like, I was like, yo, this is cool.
It's cool.
Like that's fire, because I could relate to you start to find out about the person behind it.
Yep.
And that was kind of the beginning of that. You have like Bobby and Ben, and then you have these cats, and so you like, oh, okay, like I relate to that guy. You know what I mean? So.
Did you think when you saw that, you were like, at that immediate moment, you're like, I want to do something like that, or it was just kind of bubbling and it wasn't really that action oriented?
Nah, I knew, I knew from the jump, because I definitely also had the influence of just like even the brands that I would say are like the original streetwear brands were like Fat Farm and Nietzsche, Rockaway.
Oh yeah,
like that's streetwear, right?
Yeah,
so
that's what we grew
still,
up on.
right?
Right.
And so having seen those cats and just what they were able to do as far as build something with their crew of homies and make it a global brand, like so. I always knew I wanted to be in fashion in some way, shape, or form, but I wanted to have kind of multiple verticals and music and all this sort of thing. But I discovered, streetwear and graphic tees. I actually had a store called Gray One in Pasadena, and I was down there one day and I found this T-shirt and I was like, yo, this is dope. I want to make this, And yeah.
It's funny how that happens.
Yeah.
Take me back to the time when you first discovered Fairfax, because I think that time on Fairfax has had such an impression on you.
Yeah.
And you would end up opening a store on Fairfax, youth.
Yep.
Tell me about that.
Fairfax, man, had such an impact on my life, and I think a lot of kids from the city at the time, right? Before it went global,
Yeah. This is like 2013 around that time?
Like 2013,
a little earlier?
even probably 10, like early on, but like the Hundreds even just had an office there. They hadn't even had their first store, and so around those times, we were just popping our head in the office and be like, man, they got offices, and that was cool because it was just dope to see, young cats creating businesses. But it was also an element of it that I didn't quite relate to, which was just kind of the like us versus them type energy. Was like,
what do you mean?
I think
like it was
in streetwear, there's always
if you weren't a part of this brand, then you were versus.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And like I said, my grandmother was taught us like you the one. Don't worry about it. Don't try to chase nothing else. So I always had that mentality.
Yeah.
And so anytime I felt that from the streetwear industry, I had some resistance to it.
Yeah.
But I also knew that there was still a story missing from Fairfax that wasn't told yet. You know what I mean? And it was of like the LA story, and not to say any brands don't tell that, but it's like the Black LA story. You know what I mean? There was missing like the youth of today story, and I think that's where we came in with Just Be Cool. And when I opened a youth store, my cousin reminded me one day, like she was working my store and she was like, yo, don't take this lightly. Like you the first Black owner on the block, you know what I mean?
Wow.
I was 23 at the time, 24.
23?
Yeah, I was 23, 24.
Did you understand the gravity of that?
I didn't until when she told me that. I kind of was like, wow, and I went back to work. You know what I mean? I was like, it took like 30 seconds, a minute. We just like bask in it, but then we went back to work.
Yeah. What else did you want to offer through that store to the community?
I wanted that store to be a portal for the next generation, the future creatives, the new guys that may not necessarily have this big name or platform or whatever, but I have the store now on this block. You make something dope, let's sell it here.
Yeah.
And
so bringing together those different young cats that are dope, but maybe just don't have the notoriety.
Yeah, like I'm the creators that are just like I remember one cat came in and he made hand sewn these bucket hats. I was like, yo, that's a dope hat. He's like, oh, I make it. I was like, bro, you want to sell it here? He was like, cool. And so 3-4 days later, we were selling his bucket hats. And that was kind of the energy of youth, right? It was just very much like, if you make something dope, we'll put it in the store. And you had all kind of cats shopping on Fairfax, and just like getting that exposure for these young designers.
It's a whole different thing because they wouldn't have it otherwise, right? Like it's you creating a space where like your network and just the attention that street gets alone is gonna maybe take their brand to the next place the way maybe that your relationship, how it happened with you and Dom, right? Like maybe it's a different scale, but the sentiment is the same.
It is, right. And I like I told you, I always wanted to wear the things nobody else had. So for me, this was even more exclusive. It was like the underground, like young next generation. So, we were able to offer that.
Yeah. As things evolved, over the years, how did you adjust, with the shop and like trying to keep things going, and whether it be on the creative side, but then also the business side, because like rent is there, insurance is there, all of that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I don't even know if we had insurance, you know what I mean? Like, to be completely honest with you, I think back and I was like, did I have insurance at that time? No, I probably didn't. But, I will say that for me, not going the traditional school route, like this was tuition. I was paying tuition, like just opening my own store. All them t-shirts I burned in the oven, you know what I mean? And just like, that was my tuition. And so, I had the store for a good 3-4 years, and it was a time where I just looked up and I was like, hold on, I'm doing this wrong.
What do you mean?
I'm doing this wrong because I was doing everything. You know what I mean?
Oh.
I was designing everything. I was manufacturing. I was overseeing and running the store. I wasn't like, I was just in this.
You were in it. You didn't even know what was happening. You were just every day, head down.
It drove me crazy.
Did you feel burned out?
I was burnt out. And I literally had to, like, it was for the last like 6 months, I would go work at, like, I had an office in the back. I would go work at like coffee shops and things just to be away from it. It felt, I was feeling, closed in and claustrophobic just by, because I hadn't built the foundation for it. It was just more passion at first.
Yeah.
And then, but so I think for me at the time, the best choice was to close the store down, and just, I ended it with I didn't tell too many people until I wrote a quote on the window with this paint. I said, to the caterpillar it's the end, but to the butterfly it's just the beginning, and I think that's just how I've looked at my life. It's just these like transitional moments, right? And you go into kind of the gray period where like processing what you learned, preparing for the next.
Right. Right.
So, yeah.
How did you feel when you knew you had made a decision that you were gonna close? Like, how did it? Because it's something you poured energy into, over 3-4 years, and although you knew it wasn't the end, it was a new chapter.
At first, I struggled with it. I probably held on to it a little longer than I should have. I really struggled with ending something because I felt like a quitter. I felt like a failure.
All of the things that come in.
All of the things, But once I kind of, picked up this knowledge and I talked to friends and whatnot and just elders, OGs, I was like, yo, this happens in life. It's a good thing. It's for a reason. And the minute I posted that, all of the people who had kind of just been watching me was like, oh, he's free. He's available now. And like, it was like, it's like, when you like break up with a girl, they're like, oh, he's single now. It's like, my phone was off the hook with a lot of opportunities coming in because it was like, yo, that was
Isn't that
dope.
crazy? Because that never crosses your mind when you're like, your mind is probably like, oh, I don't know what I'm about to do.
Yeah, right. and it's how the world works, right? Like you can't welcome new things if there's something taking up that space. So when you make room, you create, opportunity and space for new opportunities to come in, right? You create that space for something else to flow in. And so that's kind of what happened for me. And that's when, YG hollered at me and was like, bro, like, cause I had been designing for him a little bit.
Okay. Doing what, like tour merch or like additional clothing stuff that he had going on?
Yep. So tour merch, but we really branded it. We could already create the 400 brand.
Yeah.
And so that's when he kind of pulled me aside, called me and was like, bro, like we could do something together. Like let's really build this,
Wow.
And so we took it serious.
Wow. So you were doing that. That was going well.
Yeah.
But I feel like you had some in the back of your head about some other ideas that you had, right? And I think that would turn into your next brand. But it didn't start maybe in the typical way. Like it started with a hat. Why a hat?
Man, because my vision for Supervsn was just to create a connective tissue amongst a group of creatives I really respected, there was a group of creatives that I looked up to, but also my peers, that I said, yo, like, I just want you to have one of these, like, and know that this network of us, like, I always support you. You know, I hope the same back. And like, if any idea, anything comes to mind, like, I'm one phone call away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I saw Supervsn as that, right? It's like the union of all these people, right? It's this like community of creatives. And this was, you know, like probably 2015.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And so I just made like 50 hats, 100 hats, and just gave them out.
Wow.
You know, like and it ended
You
up
weren't worried about the money of it?
Nah, I wasn't. I just didn't want to be, like I said, I need a release from that. I needed a release from this like retail monetization.
The transactional.
Transaction. I needed a release from that. I just wanted to make something and give it to the world.
Yeah.
You know, and it ended up on like Chad Hugo got one random, you know, and it was like, cool, let me just keep giving.
Let me just keep giving.
You know, and so, yeah.
That's an interesting perspective. Going back to the brand and the hat, so the hat is showing up on different people, right? Like that's pretty clear from Chad Hugo, Aleali May, you know, like folks are really rocking with it. And you do another one, right? You do a red one. And then at what point do you decide, I think I want to expand it beyond headwear? Like what was that?
I always knew it was going to be more than headwear because it was never about apparel. It was just more about ideas, you know? And so I always knew the ideas were going to come, and when they came, I would figure out what my next release was going to be or my next offering, you know?
Right.
And so that was really how the brand started and went, and I always felt like it was like a very, like, it's like a current event in school, you know what I mean? It was just like, and I have a feeling and something going on in the world or whatever inspired me, it's like, oh, I want to make something about this. You know? And so that was really the beginning of Supervsn.
Where do you tend to lean on when it comes from what inspires you? What tends to, is there any sort of category or consistent kind of thing that you like to tell stories from a certain perspective?
I think it's always from a design perspective because I always want to have some sort of functionality and like impact with it. I like to make statements, you know what I mean, with what I do. And I feel like I always say I'm in the business of like, I'm in the energy business, you know what I mean? I like to put energy into whatever I do, you know? And so, you know, and then, you know, graphic design being like really my foundational, you know, medium or practice, like it always starts there.
Yeah.
No matter what I'm doing. You know what I mean?
He's like, I gotta draw it out. I gotta figure that out.
It starts there. It starts a sketch. It starts in Adobe Illustrator. You know, it's like it starts there.
Yeah.
For me.
Now tell me about. There's this part where it can be really hard to start a brand and then figure out how to get things made. Like. You took it upon yourself to make stuff on your grandmother's floor in the oven.
Yeah.
Everybody's not that crafty.
Yeah. Or crazy.
And I feel like folks run into a lot of challenges, especially with like getting things manufactured. How did you start to learn that business side of things, you know, after your other experiments?
So, you know, I think that I'm still learning to this day.
Okay.
Right? I'm still learning how to make things. But my experience of just continuously doing it over and over and talking to my peers, talking to OGs that are in the industry and picking game from them, I think a lot of people, I was never the type of guy to get around somebody with a brand and be like, let me get some t-shirts. You know what I mean? Like, I was always the dude who was like, yo, like, bro, how do you do that? You know what I mean? How does this work? You know? And that was just kind of my thing. So, you know, I went through a handful of brands. You know what I mean? I think, but my process was, and this also due to me not really going a traditional schooling route, I felt I always needed to like self-educate. So I was always inquisitive about, you know, how do I do this? How can I do this? I want to make something better than this. You know, I want to improve on my quality of my this. So, you know, that's just who I am. You know, it's like I'm curious. You know? Yeah.
I think that's a key characteristics of folks that are in business or successful in creative pursuits is you can't come from the space of thinking that you know it all, but you can come from a space of, I know someone's been here before me, and someone's got an answer or perspective on how to do this thing I'm trying to accomplish, right? Even if your way is like, you have a different way of it, right? Like I think that's the creative part. It's like, yeah, that's dope, but I got a different way of doing this.
For sure, 100%, 100%. Yeah. So I definitely, man, I love that. You know, I love to go around people who are making things and understand how they do that or what, you know, what's their process and then figure it out on my own.
Yeah.
You know. So.
I'm very much in that way. I like to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like I do spend the time trying to educate and learn it, but I find that it's most beneficial when I get to like put hands on it.
Yep.
Right.
Yep, for sure. For sure. Give me the tools. Like, just give me the tools. Let me figure it out. Right? It's like.
Well, tell me about this latest collaboration with PacSun, right? This is the first project where you've sort of scaled into the amount of doors that you're gonna bring your brand into. Why this project, right? Like what's so important about it where you thought this is the time where this is the right time to do this?
So, you know, I chose to do this project for multiple reasons, right? First of all, as far as it being the right time for the brand, I think that, I don't know, I'm not sure that I fully believe in the right time, right, all the way, right? I just feel like if it works, it works, and if it doesn't work, it's not the right time.
Yeah.
All right, so, but as far as how it came about and, you know, just why I wanted to do this, I did a collaboration with an artist, Corey, from Circulate. He had a program where he had a handful of designers create a t-shirt for him for his pop-up at Pac, and my t-shirt did well, you know, and so I met the guy, Stuart Rich, who worked at Pac. He's head of merchandising. He's from LA. And he was like, yo, I've been watching you for a while. I really like what you're doing, you know? And me and him kind of hit it off on that, you know? And like I said, we talked about this earlier, but my relationships are everything. You know, it's like, if I get a good feeling about this, you know, let's do business, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm not I don't follow what's cool. I don't need anybody to tell me like, oh, that's gonna mess up your whatever, like your image. Like, no,
nah,
I'm not on that train, right? So from a business standpoint, who doesn't want to scale? You know, and with the partnership like that can support that type of scale, right? That can allow me to make things that are what I want to make. They have that backing to like manufacture at that level. I was like, you know what? And then, and so I said to Rich, I was like, listen, bro, I'll do this wholeheartedly. You know what I mean? I'll be all in on it, but I need two things. I need a full partnership, right? I'm not just looking for this like, you know, just carry some of my t-shirts. It's watered down for me. It'll lose the essence of what I'm trying to do.
It won't even be impactful in the marketplace.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm a storyteller, I'm an energy person. You know what I mean? Like I gotta tell my story and like people gotta feel it.
Yeah.
So I need a full partnership to where we can really do this together and we have a mission behind this. And the second piece, we need to have a mission, we need to have some impact.
We have to have some impact.
It's gotta be a purpose for me. I don't wake up every day just to make clothes. That's not
what gets you out the bed.
That's not what moves the needle for me. You know what I mean? And so I need you to talk to your team and understand that has to work. We have to figure this out. However that makes sense, we have to do this. And because that's what Supervsn is, right? And so they're like, okay, I think we can figure this out.
Word.
Yeah. And they came back and was like, yo, like, let's do it. We talked to the team. We got you, like, let's do it. And so we have a partnership. We have a 2-year partnership. And yeah, man, the whole.
Wow,
Yeah.
Congratulations, that's
Yeah.
fire.
Yeah.
Tell me about so how does the impact part work, right? So collections in how many stores?
100 stores.
100 stores.
Yeah.
US, domestic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
100 stores domestic. And a percentage of proceeds is going to support what? What's the program?
So, and one thing I want to point out too about the partnership is that I own the brand still. You know what I mean? The partnership was not
It was not a sale percentage or even selling your brand. It's purely a partnership.
I still own the brand.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So from a business standpoint, that's like what we're here for, right? But yeah, so the partnership and the sort of the give back piece, or what the model is proceeds, a large percentage of the proceeds will be going to our foundation, the Studio Foundation.
Okay.
Right? And the Studio Foundation is basically our vehicle to then work. We've partnered with another foundation called Our Own. And Our Own is an Inglewood-based foundation, really focused on health and wellness for Black and brown communities, right? And our piece to that is the creative, right? We're really focused on like what we call is creative wellness.
Ah, I love this.
Right? And so we partnered with them and we said, listen, help us find the students that are graduating from your program, which they're targeted on high school students.
Right.
And I'm like, all right, I was a kid who didn't go to college, didn't do all that. But that 18 to 24 pocket is
important.
Huge.
Yes.
And it's so overlooked.
Yep.
Right? It's so overlooked because everybody's like, get the young kids. But the 18 to 24 is like pivotal.
Yes.
And that was me. I needed that like mentorship. So I was like, cool. Like when they leave your program, find out what they want to do. Let's talk to them, see where they want to go, what their interests are, right? I have these relationships in the industry, you know, I have fashion, all these different industries,
lanes that they could go into.
Right. And all my homies want to help. They want to support. They just need the model. I think we've all been trying to figure it out. It's like, how do we make time and how do we create the model that this is not too much of an undertaking to where we have to like say we're running a nonprofit, which is a lot, but how do we create this model to where we can all just do our part in the way that we do it?
And make sure we're nurturing the next talent up.
Right.
Yeah.
It's been the way what we've all been trying to figure out. And so I was like, cool, Studio can be the vehicle.
Yeah.
We got PAC supporting it. We have Our Own finding the next generation, right? Finding the kids that are serious about this. And we have our industry friends and partners and everybody that wants to be a part of it. So every quarter after sales come out, whatever, boom, take the sales and we can go to Our Own and we're like, all right, cool, this is our cohort group of young people, young creatives, and we're placing them paid internships, 3-month paid internships in these industry companies that they want to work in, they're interested in, and it's a lot of them are like direct with the guy, you know what I mean? It's direct with 10 Summers and Mustard, you know what I mean? It's with Chris Gibbs and Union, you know what I mean?
Come on.
Like it's Sean Witherspoon round 2, you know.
I mean, that's an invaluable experience. Like you can't just walk off the street and even access any of these people, let alone an internship.
And that's a big piece, right? Is access, right? Like access to these people and them being curious.
Yeah.
You know, like get in the room, be curious, like figure it out, like learn from these people. And so it didn't dawn on me until after that I was creating something that was for the younger version of me. You know what I mean? Like I didn't go to school. I thought I knew everything, whatever. I didn't need it. I wanted to hustle and make money as a kid, you know? But like this is for that younger version of myself.
Yeah. What are you, in your vision of that program, what do you hope the younger you is taking away from that experience?
I hope that the younger me is taking away. That's a good question because I want to my vision for this is for the younger me to continue to leave the door open, right? For the younger me to like, not just like to appreciate the opportunity that was given to them, but don't tell me you appreciate, show me you appreciate by doing your best. Show me you appreciate by becoming who I and we all know you can be. You know what I mean? I think that's the best way to tell somebody that they inspired them. Yep. Is like by becoming something, by doing something with your time, by making an impact in the world, right? And so, you know, I think that is what I hope that these kids do, and inspire the next generation, you know?
I love it, man. I love to keep the door open. Yeah. Because, you know, we don't need any more gatekeepers. No. We don't need any more gatekeepers. Where do you see, or where would you like to see our industry move forward? Whether it's streetwear, culture, fashion. Yeah. What do you hope that looks like next?
I hope that we can figure out how to, you know, build or models around the businesses that have an impact on the world, right? A positive impact, can help the next generation. But also, I want to see us like, the industry itself, like, and I'm not like, that's why I did this collab with Chris, right? Yeah. It's like this Supervsn thing. Right?
Yes,
it's like,
which I love, by the way.
That collab was like, no egos. It was like an OG having respect for me, and me obviously having so much respect for him, and be like, what can we do together?
Right.
You know, like, we're not looking at social media following. It's just like mutual respect. What can we do together? And I hope that, you know, these big corporations can realize their power and their responsibility and take more risks. You know what I mean? And I hope that, you know, the younger generation can kind of also put the ego aside and partner with some of these cats in a way that it's like, oh, we can do good together. You know what I mean? There's this like anti-element of like streetwear, and also like there's gatekeepers, you know? And I think that we need to all just realize there's enough for everybody. You know?
I love that. I love that. Because, you know, we don't have to, like, this competitive sense is be competitive against yourself.
Right.
Like, be competitive against you yesterday. I don't need to be competitive with you. I want to build with you.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, like, we got similar visions that we want to accomplish. We're going about it in different ways.
For sure.
But that's even more reason why you want to collaborate.
Right.
Right.
And bro, like, somebody actually was Russell Simmons when I was young. He had a chance to talk to him at the Magic Show. I was there, I was 16 years old there. He was like, listen, like, if somebody goes to the store to buy a Fat Farm shirt, they're gonna get some Rockwear pants to match with it. You know what I mean? And it's like, as an industry, as a community of creatives and entrepreneurs, like, they're gonna come here, watch this episode, discover me, discover Supervsn. You know, I'm gonna post this. You know, it's a network. It's an ecosystem. It's a world.
Yes.
Right? It's a world. You know, and that to me is when, like, that's sustainable. You know what I mean?
Gavin, thank you so much, man.